Welcome to Geopolitics in Conflict Breaking News. We got some information for you. What's going on, Elizabeth?
AUKUS has been finalized, or as final as it is going to get right now.
You're right. As a matter of fact, the ceremony was the agreement rather was signed yesterday with the Australian Defense Minister Peter Dutton, along with his counterparts, the officials from US and the UK. So basically, it makes now the agreement official as far as the allowing the exchange of sensitive naval nuclear propulsion information between the three countries. So this one, of course, bring with it some other issues, which we're gonna detail a little bit. So the two main issues that I'd like to mention right on the bat have to do with one, from a security perspective, geopolitics, and the other one has to do with what will happen if there is a nuclear leak from one of the submarines.
Yes.
How those countries, how the Aussies gonna feel about that, knowing that Australian people were never in favor of the presence of nuclear weapons on their territory.
Yes. And, David, if you can speak a little bit further also to the fact that the Australian citizens were not necessarily in favor of this alliance.
Well, of course, because they weren't even consulted. So I remember we did a video on it when this story broke, and we kind of like, wait a minute, were Aussies aware of this? And we did find out from some of our contacts on the ground that we didn't know about this. If it weren't for your show, we would have never heard about it. So, I mean, it was like surprising. So now I'm wondering how far the Australian government has gone into not only on this, because we all know about what's going on with the pandemic and how they're treating the Aussies and all that. But from this perspective, it's going to be now, our Aussies have no say anymore, which what it looks like.
Yes.
That's where one of the issues is. But this is not the big issue. The big issue is mainly from a security perspective. What does it mean now that it's official? Of course, those submarines, by the way, they're not going to be delivered tomorrow.
No, they're not.
Let's just make that clear so people know and understand.
Yes.
However, in international relations, context matters.
Yes.
And that's all it is. So because now you're going to see those major changes from a security landscape, a regional one that is.
Well, and I think one of the things that is the most important about this situation is, in fact, that it's more of a statement in its own way. It's more of a statement between the AUKUS countries and making that statement towards China. And I think that's the biggest issue, don't you think?
Yeah, well, exactly. It's like what we just had yesterday with our guest, Sorab, and he is somebody I trust his judgment, because I'm aware of his background, academic that is, and his understanding of the landscape in the Asia Pacific realm. And we did bring up this point in highlighting now that's going to shift the dynamics in the region, and it's just going to have to be. And all this comes with
I'm sorry, Ramen. That's my dog. If you guys can hear him, I'm so sorry.
No, the doggies are excited about this.
He's very excited.
Don't let them be. Let them be. So it's the idea of this geopolitical shift. It's going to impact so many other aspects. So, and when you take this into consideration with what just happened yesterday, with the U.S. Naval assets crossing through Taiwan Strait, it makes you now wonder, are we provoking Chinese beyond their point of patience? Like, where did they lose their patience? That's what David, I'm concerned about.
And I want to ask you this question because, I don't understand necessarily, and I would love some more clarity from you about why this provocation is happening. Why is this provocation happening?
I know what you mean. It's no different than what we're doing in the Black Sea with the Russians. When you have UK navals going all the way near the the borders of Russia's waters and so forth. Why the provocations? It's because that's one way of, we want to see how far we can go with it. My big concern, truly, my big concern and fear is that Chinese will run out of patience.
I have a similar concern. And, one of the things that I want to bring up is the fact that this provocation is the reason, at least that I can see, that, we have the hypersonic glider situation that we have right now. And now that submarines have been introduced and nuclear submarines have been introduced, is that a race that's going to happen on its own also? Is that, is China just going to sit back and say, okay, it's totally fine that you have nuclear submarines and we're just not going to do anything about it? I mean, that seems completely unreasonable.
It is true. It's unreasonable because China's not going to sit back and just say this. But what's interesting about this is that based on what you just said about how now the introduction of the submarine into the mix of all this, interesting enough is how ASEAN countries now looking at these changes that's taking place. And this is one thing about when it comes down to geopolitics, you have to look at the trends, where things are moving. We all remember how this starts back in September and how it's been progressing. So back then, ASEAN countries saying, wait, we're going to be neutral because they signed a treaty where they will not have any nuclear weapons. So all of a sudden, now they are concerned that now you're going to have a nuclear submarines in their vicinity, and how that's going to change the global, it's going to change the regional security landscape. Because that is where the big concern now, because everybody's going to be thinking, when I say everybody, every country in the region is going to be thinking about its own security.
Well, and it should. And so this is a very interesting quote that that I found that I'd love to bring to the table.
Sure.
And that is, it's from Indonesia's defense minister, and he said it this last Saturday. Officially, our position is that, of course, Southeast Asia should remain nuclear free. And the fear, of course, among Southeast Asian nations is that this will spark an arms race. He said, but as I said, the emphasis of every country is to protect their international interests. If they feel threatened, they will do whatever they can to protect themselves. And this is what I mean when that we understand and we respect them, speaking about AUKUS. And that's a pretty interesting departure from what they even said in September.
Yeah, and that makes you wonder, were they pressured? Or Indonesian government, which we all know the disconnect, and I will use the term, the disconnect between Indonesian government and its people. There has always been some sort of a disconnect there. The same thing in Malaysia, the Malaysian government and the Malaysian people. There's a disconnect there, just because how the government operates and behave, with some corruption cases and all that. But that's a separate conversation for another day. So yes, it is very interesting how Indonesia took the stand. But, remember, this is now for the whole ASEAN entity that they made it clear. They still hold, like I asked our guest yesterday, and I said, where do you see ASEAN moving forward with this issue of AUKUS and U.S. relations, or U.S.-China relations and so forth? He said they're gonna, and I concur with him, because that's exactly what I found through my own research, that they're gonna maintain that neutrality to the best of this ability, because on one end, they don't want to jeopardize the economic aspects of it. Why? China is a big market, but ASEAN itself, a $2.3 trillion economy, and over 30% of the world population is in those countries. They're not going to risk the economic aspects of it. On the other hand, you're going to think in terms of security, and that's where that concern comes in. Because if I am to be sitting in one of those countries, I'll be wondering, what will happen if a hot war erupts between US and China, which we don't foresee anyway, but you have to consider the worst scenario, because any conflicts between US and China it's going to impact the regional countries, no matter how you look at it.
Well, honestly, it would impact everyone in the entire world.
Well, we'll start with the regional first, because
Yes.
those will be harmed the most. So that's usually what I see. And this is where I ask the question, what is the significance, the geopolitical significance of this AUKUS aspects of it as it moves forward? Well, one of the things is now, which China's going to, I am sure they have considered that, but China now is going to be faced with a powerful new defense alliance of sort of dynamics. Whether the alliance is going to be successful or not, that's another question. But the fact that an alliance is emerging in that part of the world near China's border, and now China is going to have to face this reality when it comes down to the Indo-Pacific,
Yes.
And that also has been another question that emerged from this with the UK. What makes you wonder why the UK, but not Germany, but not France? Well, because the UK has exited from the European Union.
Yes.
So, and that begs the question, will the EU side with the United States in case of a conflict with China?
That is a very interesting question. Yeah. Do you have an opinion on where they would side?
My personal opinion will be no, they won't, because they are not going to risk their economic prosperity or the economic development, whatever you want to call it, to just side with the US after what the US did to them in Afghanistan.
That's another question that I'd like to bring up, because, the world watched what happened with Afghanistan.
Exactly.
And I still don't personally understand why that happened the way that it did. It was so deeply unnecessary that I think a lot of the world doesn't understand why that happened the way that it did either. And so looking at the credibility of the United States, I think that was probably one of the most detrimental things in recent times that could have happened. And, these Southeast Asian countries are looking at that situation and they're saying, well, the US influence here, what could that be? Look at the US influence in Afghanistan and what happened there and the condition that they left Afghanistan in.
That's correct. Well, this, to me personally, the way I looked at it is after, which I sort of predicted in a way, it was a little bit sooner than I anticipated. I was giving it an extra 2-3 months, but it happened faster than that. So, and I'll admit to it. But the idea of the shift, the quick shift of the Biden administration from Afghanistan into reallocating the resources and the resources towards focusing on the China rise and so forth, because they needed to tackle that one. And that's where I see sort of how ASEAN countries is going to be reconsidering their position as things progresses. As I said earlier, remember, this AUKUS, it's not that the submarine is going to be delivered tomorrow. And also another point, if I may add quickly here, is that this agreement is not pertain only to the submarines. This agreement also include within it the key areas such as artificial intelligence, cyber warfare, and underwater capabilities, and the long-range strike capabilities. So if you take a step back and assess what all those four have in common, they have one thing in common, is that China has developed capabilities in these four areas. So,
well, and some might argue that they've developed capabilities that are far outside of the ones that these other countries have. In fact, we had Richard Turin, who talked about the situation that the rest of the world is in versus China with artificial intelligence.
And he was right. Even somebody, I remember someone on Twitter commented like, well, how can you say China has beat the US in AI? It's almost like saying there is a race towards electricity or something like that. So the argument, which I respect the person's opinion, he's entitled to his opinion. I respect it. There is no, but at the same time, the argument doesn't hold because the argument is weak. And that's exactly what Richard Turin was highlighting to. This is not about just the AI by itself, it's the implementation. of it within the systems. And that's where I feel the individual, whomever that is, made that comment, didn't understand exactly what Richard was talking about. And this is why, to go back to AUKUS, that's why within the agreement, they focused on the artificial intelligence, because they know China is far ahead in artificial intelligence, and that's going to change the dynamics for what lies ahead. So
well, and that's a wonderful point, and I'm really glad that you brought that up, because ultimately the submarines aren't going to be delivered immediately.
No, not at all.
But all of these other things, they're really critically important, and they're critically important right now. And so the conversation about AUKUS, it circulates around the submarines. And yes, the submarines are important because there are consequences for, what if there is a nuclear spill? What that has a huge impact on the environment. How does that make the fact that there are so many other things in this, I think, is more important almost than the submarines themselves, and that's not getting talked about.
Yeah, it's because that's just one part of the equation you're talking about. Because AUKUS, what our viewers need to understand is that AUKUS is just half of the equation. Yeah, there's much bigger thinking here, because as to what the thinking really is. Because you once again take a step back and consider, how come only UK got involved in this but not the rest of Europe? And there, to me personally, and I speak for myself here, that's where I see the it's almost like a chess game. You see where where the pieces are moving. Europeans are going to be thinking in terms, well, if the US wants to get involved with China, good luck. We don't want to be part of it, no matter what we hear and all that stuff. So that's where I see this is going, except that it's going to change the dynamics on the ground from a security perspective. But also, don't expect China to be just sitting and watching. No, they're going to have to make whatever necessary adjustments. My fear and concern, once again, and I will express it, is that my fear and concern is that if China runs out of patience.
I have that same fear and concern, and I think ultimately that's the main fear and concern about the AUKUS situation is, instead of de-escalating, the way that this appears to be handled is, well, I have the bigger guns.
Exactly.
And you have the smaller guns. Well, then they get the bigger ones, then we get even bigger, and then they get bigger, and then
that's that's the arms race.
It is. That's exactly where the arms race.
That's where the concern is. But also, this ties also to how things are. What's the word I'm looking for? The way they are sort of expressed to the masses. Language plays a role into all this. Because you're gonna have, and you and Ross are gonna do a special edition regarding the language part of how a message is conveyed to the outside world, and people might not even understand those dynamics. So
this is a really great time to talk about that. So my background is actually in linguistics, human behavior, human lie detection, hypnosis in sort of a conversational or covert setting. So that's been my background for the majority of my life. And so we are going to actually start diving into some of the linguistics, some of the hypnotic language that's used during these speeches, during when you see headlines in news articles, things that are very, very specific, and they're said in a specific way so that you believe exactly what it is they want you to believe. So we just started doing that. If you'd like to see a little bit more about that, I have Twitter. I just joined Twitter, and my at is Alchemy of E. So follow me on Twitter. And David is also on Twitter.
Yes, I am. So, as a matter of fact, I just tweeted this morning about this issue of the U.S. naval crossing through Taiwan Strait. So, and we're going to be talking about that at some point. But what you just mentioned, we're going to be moving into that for our members, of course, because this is a specialized area per se. that you and Ross is going to be focusing on. And a lot of people needs to understand how to read the information, because the keywords sometimes plays on people's minds per se. And this is where this AUKUS is all about. Yeah, that's how I see it. So.
And I think that that's the best thing that you can really take away from this, is that AUKUS in its own way is a message. And the most important part of it is the message that it is to China.
Exactly. So just before we leave, what do we have for our members coming up?
We have a special presentation on the death of the US dollar, and that is next week.
Oh my gosh. Are we talking Bitcoin here that's going to take over?
We are definitely going to address Bitcoin. And I also want to address one thing. There are some people who may not have agreed with our guest yesterday. And, we had Peter Schiff on, and even Richard Turin talked a little bit about Bitcoin, and they were not positive about it. But we want to give you guys a well-rounded set of information, because if we just tell you the same thing you already know, what's the
point? Yeah.
You do not have to agree with the people that we bring on. You don't even have to agree with us. What we want you to do is think your way through what you believe. And we want to give you the best information we can from both sides. It's said that the best way to understand somebody else's position, or the situation as a whole, is to argue somebody else's position. Argue the position that you don't agree with, and you'll understand your own position so much better doing that.
Exactly. So just to let our viewers know, if you have not subscribed yet, please do so.
Yes.
Because we need your support. So one of the support you can help us with is subscribe to our channel as soon as possible. So because we need to grow those numbers. And also check out our membership at geopoliticsinconflict.com. We do offer live presentations, live Q&A, and is also a platform where we can talk openly. As a matter of fact, the last presentation we had about Vladimir Putin's relationship with President Xi, and how the media here in the West did not cover certain aspects we talked about.
At all. In fact, that one was really, really interesting. And we have all of them available at geopoliticsinconflict.com, and all of our past presentations are also available for replay.
And also, we're going to come back this afternoon about 4 or 5 hours from now, because we are working on verifying some information regarding another breaking info or an update, shall we say, that we wanted to share with our viewers. So probably will be around 4 to 5 hours from now, we're going to do that. So anything to add, Elizabeth, before we leave?
No, that was great. I'm looking forward to the next one. Just a little bit of a hint. It has to do with energy.
Oh, yes.
Very, very interested in that one. There is so much going on, and it's really important.
Yeah, well, especially when it comes down to the info that I'm waiting on from Japan. There is something involved with that. So to you all, guys, we say thank you for your support. Subscribe if you have not done so. Check out our membership. Until we see you next time. And as always, stay informed. Till next time. Bye-bye.